Hi. I just need a little bit of congratulatory stroking here, please.
First of all, language. Second of all, this is I'm so discombobulated that it's 2 minutes before. We're usually like at 12:04.
And I'm sweating, and you're like, the lights, put it down. Look at us, guys.
The light's not that great. I'm too bright.
You can teach old dogs new tricks. Too bad I'm not doing. Do I have to do this? Is this what tradition?
No, because then you're gonna stand up, and then there's.
And then my skirt is very short. This would be an OnlyFans special edition of the Paloma Media Podcast with Nancy Rommelmann and Matt Welch. Hi, everyone. This actually, we were kind of bad about this because we're bad about all things tech. But you want to tell them the name of this new weekly podcast?
Did we agree that it's called See You Next Tuesday?
It's called See You Next Tuesday. That is because we have lunch every Tuesday, and we start out here, and we are going to just try to do this every Tuesday. Of course, I'm going to be away next Tuesday, so we'll probably miss them every once in a while, but we are going to come and see you at the lunch hour on Tuesdays to talk about stuff of the week and media stuff. And I was thinking while you were pacing the studio talking to the Fifth Column boys just now, that we both have some interesting news that has happened in the past 2 weeks for both of us in the same arena, don't we?
How do you mean, Nancy? In what way?
Well, I don't know. It could begin with an S and end with a K.
True.
And it's not suck.
Now, we did suck.com.
It's suck.
Shout out to the great 1990s publication featuring Heather Havrilesky's or Polyesters, the great cartoon Polyester with Terry Colon. Anyways, no, we talked about it the last time that you and I sat in the chairs.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, that Nancy and Sarah Hepola.
Oh, had I launched it? Oh, I'm sorry. It was just about to launch.
Anyways, it's great. It's called Smoke 'Em If You Got 'Em. I sang its praises last time, but now it's on Substack. It's getting subscribers. People like it. They're saying nice things in public about it, and they're all correct about this. It's very, very good. They talk about having abortions and everything that you want to hear. It's fine.
And we talk about a lot of stuff. We're talking about different stories that interest us in the news. One thing I do want to get to, which she's actually traveling, so am I, but we'll talk again on Friday, release it, I don't know, whenever. But they did just, they found Vicky White, White, and then she had, I just want to mention this. I'm going to mention it on the Substack with Sarah. So they were rammed by a police car. Casey, was that his name? The prisoner, he was driving. They rammed the car. They ran to get them. They pulled out the guy who had been driving, and he said, "Go take care of my wife." And she was dead. Anyway, that sent my mind spinning in 5 million directions.
Every female in this country is fascinated by this story and the Johnny Depp.
I'm actually, so Sarah Hepola is the one that she listens to I watched a few hours of it, but I'm kind of letting her handle this. No, I am interested in the story. Yes, of course, you think you know what's going on, but I was also thinking that, this is a man who has been a murderer, who has a terrible history. I've talked about it. It's awful, but he's also been in jail for years and years and years. Someone shows him kindness, and they decide they're going to have a new life. I could actually see, I'm sure 99% of people are going to say he's a dirtbag manipulator, but I can also see how any human being wants love and wants to be loved. And if he felt love, then he did. And I think of course it's possible. We all feel love. And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Okay. No,
feel love. Career criminals.
Sing it, dude.
Live Utah. Hi, Marino High. Sinatra's Rat Pack was on his great podcast talking about the Beatles.
That's you.
Did a 2-episode bit of creating, reconstituting Beatles records out of their solo materials from 1970 and 71. It's awesome. It's really fun.
I think this person also sent some incredibly beautiful liquor.
Hooch, because he is a Texas drunkard.
Thank you so much.
So good.
We enjoyed that the other night, and we still, I believe
we're still enjoying.
Still have some left.
This is where we do the columns and palomas and things like that, and
the bar
room
right
over there. It's the green room.
Yeah,
has just so much listener hooch, and it's top shelf stuff. In fact, we had people here because the other Substack related news that Nancy was referring to is that Fifth Column podcast, which has been around for 6 years, took its talents to Substack on Cinco de Mayo, on Cinco de Drinko, and that's been super fun and challenging and time soaking and all that kind of stuff.
It looks great, Matt.
It looks
the
pretty good.
presentation looks beautiful.
There's a lot of benefits associated with it. Actually, that we're just talking about it, and I'm not talking out of school with the other boys, but like the marrying of basically the newsletter provision company with podcasting makes so much sense. It makes more sense than actually just today was the Dispatch announced it was leaving Substack. It's more difficult for more of a magazine format to do it. But anyways, that's boring insider baseball stuff. What I mean to say is that because of Fifth Column moving to Substack, we had mentioned on that podcast a month or so ago, like, yeah, we're going to do a live show in New York. It might be on Cinco de Mayo. And then it quickly was not. But the fanatics who listen to, and we love every single one of them, listen to the Fifth Column, like a couple of them booked tickets to New York, just like, even though they didn't make a promise and didn't have a venue and whatever, they came. And so we had a party here.
That's right. We're like, what are we going to do? I'll bake you raspberry crumpets or whatever.
And we will drink Sinatra's Rat Packs.
And we do drink. And what is this question? Look, it's in yellow. And thank you for the $10, which I'm not.
BU Vandals. Matt, what happened? This is a very pertinent question. This is Fifth Column related, not Paloma, but we handle all comers here.
Yes.
Matt, what happened to the second Sunday live stream for founding members Never Fly Coach? This means more money to Nancy. Good. Always be giving more money to Nancy. So it's one of the things that we have been advertising with the highest level on Fifth Column subscription is that we're doing a second Sunday's live stream, and we figured out a way to answer that question with a straight face, which is that it's the second Sunday since after we founded the Substack.
Yeah.
So this upcoming Sunday, don't know exactly when. We were just talking about it. Likely will be towards 8-ish, 8:30-ish Eastern time. We will do that thing, and we will from that point on we'll be doing second Sunday live stream. This last time it was Mother's Day, and there's a lot of trouble.
But my question
but also
is,
give more money.
How does that monetize for me? Because that's the important question here.
Because you deliver on the promises. You bake the pie when you say you're going to bake the pie.
And that means more money for me. Somehow I think, just that great.
I don't think the mics are working again.
Wait a minute. I did change this. I went in and I don't know what to say, guys. I went in and changed it to the Roadcaster, which is what we're looking at.
Give us a in the comments. The mics are working fine, says BU Vandals.
Okay, I'll turn this up too. I mean, I did. It was okay. I will say there are occasionally like this weird ghost in the machine. It changes the settings. We don't change them. Why would I change them back to something shitty? But okay.
Well, we got a rule of two, so it sounds fine. Okay.
So we're also here this week because there's been
I think it's just going through the computer mic. No, it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. I don't know what to tell you guys.
Damn it all to hell.
I'll try again and maybe.
It sounds so good in our ears. These microphones.
It does. It sounds so sexy. It's like Barry White. Yeah. It's Barry White. Not Barry White.
Sweaty balls.
Anyway, there obviously have been some concerning things happening with masking and COVID in schools. It's been going on for a long, long time now, but it still seems to be going out. And my new best friend, Dr. Lucy McBride, I told her that we were going to be in here today. And since she is a doctor and she's written about COVID and all this, I said, you have any questions for Matt? Throw them at me and I will ask him tomorrow. And she said, yeah, ask him why Mayor Adams wants to reinstitute masking 2-year-olds.
I mean, it's not reinstituting, it's continuing.
Okay.
So we are still in New York City, and most of you who are watching and listening don't live here, I'm guessing. It's still required for kids in congregate settings who are between the ages of 2 and 4, which means up to the vaccination eligibility age. They're required to wear masks. So my 7-year-old, she goes to her first grade school. And then she goes to an after school thing, and there's some kids there who are under 5 and after school. So she still wears a mask every single day, my 7-year-old, indoors. And there are people, part of the reason that sparked this conversation, I just mentioned on Twitter late at night, which is always a good sign, that my wife had gone to church and saw an old friend of ours there who we haven't seen for a while, who runs a daycare, just terrific. I'll tell you about it. If anyone has New York kids in Brooklyn, I can't recommend highly enough. Contact me directly. You know where to But anyways, we hadn't seen her in a while, and asked how it was going, and she said, and this is, it's mostly pre-K, it's really, young kids, that a huge percentage of these kids are going through really serious behavioral, emotional, and mental problems. This is in brownstone, pretty affluent Brooklyn, a lot of multinational families. She herself comes from Europe, and just like a large percentage of the 4-year-olds in this place are in therapy or seeing counselors of some sort, and that just was not the case 3 years ago. It was not the case. There's always, kids are kids. They're going to be bouncing off the walls and experiencing their own problems, including our own. But just the amount of it is staggering. So I just mentioned this as a one-off anecdote because I found it interesting, and it was remarkable how many people came back and said, like, yes, I work in a school, or we tried to get counseling or therapy for our kid, and we couldn't find any available slot within 30 miles.
Right, no therapists available
because it's so oversubscribed. I mean, it was just, especially at the time of the night, it should not have been a semi-viral, but it shouldn't have been a tweet that provoked so much. And you realize there's been a lot of pieces recently over the last couple of weeks. 60 Minutes ran one. New York Times, David Leonhardt did one. New York Magazine, Wall Street Journal also did one. There's been a bunch of pieces 2 years later talking about the wipeout, the mental and emotional wipeout. The New York Times also had a front pager from about 10 days ago that was just really alarming. The suicides up, suicidal ideation way up. New Yorker also had one, and Jonathan Haidt is. He's sort of sounding the alarm, probably more than I'm willing to accept so far about social media on teens. But just at the end of the pandemic, and the thing that strikes me so much is that in the case of our friend who runs the pre-K thing, it's like we're 4-year-olds. 4-year-olds are messed up, and there's a bunch of different reasons for that. You can imagine. I mean, there's just as someone was pointing out in response to my initial tweet, I mean, there's just all this ambient stress in one's household that adds to it. Just the pandemic sucks, right? It's a bad, hard thing. But also, the United States did more did more school closures, more school interruptions, has certainly done more masking than any industrialized country. And I don't know what the exact comparative rates are of mental unwellness among kids, either the U.S. compared to, say France or somewhere else during the time of the pandemic. And I also don't know, unlike I do know, the rates of difference when it comes to things like the negative effects that distance learning has had. You can see a comparative difference in school districts that were heavily closed and school districts that were heavily opened, as well as, and this is important going forward, the huge difference between whether the attendance in school rebounded or not. There's been a bunch of studies that they've written about that they have not. They're based on how much masking. Like the biggest factor to determine whether schools have continued to decline in enrollment or snapped back is how much they were closed during the most closed days of the pandemic. But anyway, it's just sort of a combination of things. I think that it is big enough, and Lord knows, it's something that we know. Everybody in our kind of parent group, our kids groups, everyone is going through this huge amount of stuff. Like it's not just a pig and a python. It's larger than that. It's large enough, the effect on this generation of kids, and it's really heartbreaking in ways that's it's kind of hard to even talk about. It's larger than a pig, and it's larger than our capacity to think about it. I believe we have allowed for damage to be done. We've exacerbated damage to be done on a generation of kids, and early on, there's a lot of people like, kids are resilient, they're going to rebound. That's not really on average happening right now, and it's heartbreaking. And we're going to be dealing with the effects societally, dealing with the effects of of how the composition of cities have changed. The biggest counties in the country for decline in population and also decline in public school enrollment, they're the same counties. It is all 5 boroughs in New York, but especially Manhattan and Brooklyn. It is whatever the county is in Chicago. It's Los Angeles. They're losing population. They're losing kids. They're not coming back. Whereas kids in more suburban and rural areas have come back to the schools.
So that in one way, even though and wipeout is a good term for it, and the repercussions we're going to feel for we have no idea how long. I mean, forever, right? It changes the path of the course of human history. But it is heartening to me to see that parents. This is what I was talking about with Lucy McBride. It's like using your actual human guts, not the fact that you might be mad at blue or mad at red, or your mayor says this, or you're scared, or you want to look like a good person, or your school district said this. No, they used their actual human instincts when it came to being a parent and said, you know what? No, I'm not doing this. I'm not keeping my child in this situation, and I'm leaving. I'm going to leave. That is very heartening to me, and that is something I think should have, and in many cases were, been put into effect a very, very long time ago. I mean, we've talked about this before. I basically started living my life in June 2020. Yes, we all went inside. It was March 2020. Nobody knew what the fuck. And then by the end of May, early June, I was like, all right, I'm going to just kind of live my life. We started having people over here for lunch, not big giant parties where we were like making out with each other, but just sort of like reintegrating into society. Well, the country was not even close to being ready to do that. But the data, as again, Lucy McBride was telling me last night, and as you very well know, by December 2020, we very well knew who COVID was killing.
Yeah, and I mean, I would ratchet that back even to June and July.
Oh yeah, right.
I mean, I follow this very closely in terms of the kids. We certainly knew as of June 2020 and no later that kids were, knock on wood, just disproportionately not susceptible
and not
to suffer
vectors
from, to catch, and to be vectors of this thing.
They were not vectors, and they were not catching it. Who was catching it? Obviously, the olds were catching it. The immunocompromised were catching it.
And suffering from it.
And suffering. And were some children, yes. The children that would get it were the ones that were compromised, obese, or diabetic, or yes. So they, just like they're going to be more susceptible to just about anything. So you have to protect certain people. But the idea that we will burn down our way of life, burn down the economy, and sacrifice our children for what? What has been accomplished here? Nothing has been accomplished here. And Lucy had a very good line. She's like, if we're supposed to trust the CDC has to trust us. It has to trust us to give us the information. We've talked about this a billion times, and it's what we do in our careers. Give the people the information they need and let them make good choices. Do not scare them. Do not hold back information because, like, well, I don't know, Americans are fucking stupid. So it's like, no, tell them what's going on and let them make decisions.
It's the difference between trying to shape behavior and trying to give information.
It's okay. The reason why, first of all, it's always maddening. It's maddening as a human. It's maddening as a journalist, and seeing journalists that don't do that. But look what we've done. Look what we've done to our children. For what reason? Why did we do this? Who's going to come up to the plate and say, well, let me tell you all the great reasons we did this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Jennifer Say, and I'm apologies if I'm getting my school reopening crew wrong, but I think it's Jennifer Say who was fired from her job at Levi's, where she was a corporate vice president or something or other. And she was reacting to the various articles that I was referencing previously. And she was saying, who is going to look at those articles and ingest this information and come back and say, you know what, sorry, I was wrong. Not just like I was wrong about whatever call that they made or supported back, in July 2020, in August or September of 2021, when Andrew Cuomo here was warning that opening the schools would make them a super spreader event. There was zero to suggest that was going to be true. But who's going to go back and not only just apologize for that, but let's start with apologizing for trying to run the Lucy McBrides and the Jennifer Says and a whole bunch of other, Emily Oster. My God, she has like received so many torrents of sort of rhetorical abuse over the period of time. There was an active attempt, and I'd written about this in September 2019 in a really long piece for Reason that wasn't this pre-COVID, right? And it was about how in the New York City public school system, there was, to my shock, there was this quite deliberate attempt to try to use the accusation of racism, which is a terrible thing to be accused of anywhere, but especially in New York, to try to discourage parents who disagreed with a rightly set of controversial policies to just try to get them out of there, to use that as a weapon, clear the playing field so that you wouldn't have that obstacle anymore. I found this shocking.
It's shocking.
And but you know, maybe it was my mistake back then to imagine that it was a sort of it had to be tethered to things that were explicitly about kind of race relations or equity and these kinds of things. Actually, it's kind of a habit of mind. What people did to those who were making very sensical, very European in context advocacy in the summer of 2020, when we had enough data, what you would be called is someone who wanted teachers to die. You don't understand anything about teachers. You
Grandma killer.
You want to, you just want to use teachers as a babysitter and a guinea pig and all this. I mean, the amount of abuse that you would get, and I don't care about it. I'm a journalist. It's fun. But normal people, it's super not fun, and they shrink back. And Emily Oster quit Twitter, and granted, who cares what a single person does? But you know, Jennifer Say lost her job. They discouraged public participation, and in doing so, the conversation about it and the policies that emanated from those conversations were worse. It had a direct negative effect, much bigger than on, you know, the personal sense of comfort of people's lives. You should be able to have a perfectly rational conversation with someone who believes that it's a smart thing to take a bulldozer and bulldoze sand into a skate park in Venice Beach, California in April 2020. You should be able, which is insane, but I should be able to have that conversation with that person without calling them a communist baby killer. That's not how it happened. On the other side of that argument, in the United States, partially because of our political culture, partially also because of the power and the lopsided influence of teachers' unions on both the Democratic Party and then just in our federalist or federal way of doing things. We don't have, you know, in France, they're like, do we want the schools to open? Yes, the schools must be open. Boop, the schools are open. We don't have that system in America, and that's probably for the best if you appreciate local control of things. But yeah, that's where I want the first apology to come to. For those who actively try to discourage participation, for those of us who I think on balance, looking back, we're more right. You know, just stop that habit, please, of trying to just clear the field of people that you disagree with by making horrendous accusations of what, you know, their alleged motives are.
Okay, so we can take two examples. We could take like a pretty obviously someone in power example, like Carranza, who was the Richard Carranza, who's not there anymore, correct? So sorry, you're gonna give a little backstory about who he is. He was in San Francisco and then he was in New York. What was his title? Chancellor? What was
he was the chancellor of schools in both places.
And basically made a fucking mess, sorry, excuse language, in San Francisco, and then came here and had, I mean, just an incredible petri dish to make a way, way, way bigger mess. But, you know, it's like you had on one track, you had, you know, the racism accusations here and the COVID here, and they just smashed up and destroyed many things. So you could take someone like him that you would really want an apology from. I want to give you to give me the odds of whether you think he's going to do that. But then you've got just like the sort of, you know, the Park Slope mom, who it basically, when you walk in, and I think Emmanuel had this experience, just like sort of like the horror and the disdain and the contempt that they give you when you're like suggesting like, maybe we can take the masks off the kids. Maybe we can take the masks off the kids. You know, I mean, like, you know, will either of these people, as examples, will they apologize, or do they not? Do they just not even think that way?
I mean, so the other last night I think I retweeted that video of the bulldozing of the sand into the skate park in Venice Beach, and just mentioned that it was like a top 5, like we lost our minds during the pandemic moment for me. Another one would be the yanking of the I think the surfer or the skimboarder out of the water in Malibu.
What?
And some of the response was like, "Hey, look, it was early. We didn't know. Give them a little bit of a break." And
no, sorry, no. It goes back to fucking human instinct. What part of human instinct tells you he's in the Pacific Ocean? He might be infecting people. What is this? You might actually be infecting yourself if you go and grab him. What? There's no part of human instinct that can possibly tell you that is the right thing to do.
Well, that's untrue. There must be some part of somebody's instinct
obeying
that tells them that, and I think that we can see that those who have that instinct
to obey,
it didn't, and also to tell people what to do. I mean, California was yellow taping playgrounds in December of 2020. Outdoor California, like the point of California, like why we did California was so that you wouldn't have consumption in the winter anymore. You can go outside and take the cure, and like that's literally the best thing you could possibly do during COVID is get some sun on your face and breathe the outdoor air and not spread it. And California was yellow taping playgrounds. It's so
you're saying that the drive to tell other people what to do, not just to obey authorities, because we definitely know there are people that love to obey authority. They just lick it up. But that gives them then this sense of power that I'm going to tell the next person below me what to do.
I always found, and this might not be a direct way to address that question, but it's part of it somehow, that some of the people who are most enthusiastic about those kind of policies, or at least most likely to say, hey, come on, look, we got to, there's 1 million people dying, or there's, now I think the global number is 6 million people dying. We got to do something. What's wrong with you? Pushing that back to me when I was talking about school policies and kid policies in particular, were people who didn't have kids. I think that there were some people who liked that, but the vast majority of parents that I was in contact with, including, in deep blue New York here in Brooklyn, the parents, most of them were like, what is going on here? So it's a strange thing. There's like there's the normal human instinct to think that kids are going to be disease vectors because they usually are.
True.
But then once it became kind of partisan politicized to the extent that people were afraid to object to school closures because they didn't want to be identified as being Trumpian. And this is something this is a pattern that followed everywhere. All reporting shows it, which is crazy. Once it became that, then people felt dug in. They felt dug in, and it was part of your political identity to be like this. And as someone who just doesn't have a political identity, at least in the context of two-party politics, it's maddening. It's maddening to go and to think that and to see that the biggest like correlative factor of whether your school district was open or closed was what the voters there locally thought about Donald Trump and what the strength was relatively of their teachers union. It had nothing to do with the amount of infection or the amount of case rates or anything like that. There's no correlation.
I've said this 1,000 times. I think that all the crazy animus against Trump, pro-Trump or against Trump, that people carried from 2015 on until 2021, when Trump wasn't there anymore, they still had that need. And so they just, whoop, it just jumped host to the next thing that we can fight each other about. And look what it did. Who paid the price for that, guys? Who paid the price for that?
Let's take a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Here are comments. Matthew Hunt says, thank God my kids never had to wear masks in daycare. One of the few good things about Alabama. There's probably more good things about Alabama.
Yeah.
Matthew Hunt. I know quite a few people who sort of like in Los Angeles, they have pretty strict rules about that, but who found the people who would break the rules. Like there's a good friend of mine who I will not name and out in this context had like the speakeasy daycare that just didn't do the mask.
Underground, baby.
And I think that is going to be seen as one of the reasons why we have this crisis. Why we're talking about it in the first place is that there's this mental and emotional unwellness that is just so noticeable. I mean, in our peer group of people, I mean, it's just a festival of. I mean, the least of it is vaping, and we're talking middle school people here. There's vaping. There is people buying, testing positive for edibles. There is all kinds of just like cutting. There's anorexia. There's this. There's that. And it is so widespread. Like it's hard to close my eyes and think of someone that we know who isn't affected by this. And for the younger ones, you know, people have been wearing masks their whole lives, or for a huge percentage of their lives. My 7-year-old, you know, wore a mask for close to 30% of her life. That in sort of like her public-facing life, that can't be good for your mental health. When you can't pick up language, you can't see what people are saying, you can't see smiles. And she was, you know, totally good with it for a really long time, or like was willing to accept it until we went to France and kids weren't wearing masks. And she's like, okay, cool. Can I move to France now? Like just became done with it.
I didn't make her wear it on the subway. Well, she lost it. We lost it at the restaurant. So like, what was I going to do? I didn't have a mask for her. Okay, another question.
So Tom, my 8-year-old son, seems well adjusted, but save for 2 months of shutdown, we sent him to his daycare. His public school teacher says most kids don't act appropriately for second grade level. Yeah, that's the thing. It's the you know, our 7-year-old, we set up a pod with a couple of families because the elementary school was incredibly unpredictable. They at some point, you know, Sunday night at 9:30, they said, closing the school for 2 weeks. And so we'd set up the pod initially just to sort of handle the remote learning. They had a dedicated kind of teacher to do this, and then also just to be a shock absorber for whenever the place acted erratically. And therefore, they had regular daily stuff as opposed to this kind of flailing around. And yeah, the difference between even that group and then the group back in school once they started like going back into school that year, because I've since taken her out into a private school, was definitely noticeable. And of course it's going to be. I mean, just your socialization is broken. My oldest daughter's in 8th grade, and you know, they didn't have imagine your middle school, right? I went to junior high, 7th to 9th, but imagine whatever your middle school is, and you don't have it for like a year and a half, basically 2 years. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in middle school. Middle school sucks. You're going through puberty. You're doing the things that all the people do. It's always going to be bad anyways. But imagine that you go from being a creepy shut-in, which, you know, the boys are all playing video games and the girls are just sort of hiding in bed for a year and a half. And then suddenly they do all of the things at once in like 4 months. It's crazy. It's crazy to imagine that you're not going to come unglued in that circumstance. What impact do you think, this is from Bishop, what impact do you think the COVID panic will have on the midterms? I don't know, man. I mean, I think the midterms fundamentals are way more just about the normal pendulum swing that's just kind of overwhelming. Right now, the first-term president who's unpopular always gets wiped out in the midterms. There's only like one. I mean, there's basically no exceptions to that. George W. Bush in 2002 is its own thing. But I have always said, or like maintained, predicted that the amount of parental anger of kids, of parents of kids in the K through 12 system, is bigger than those who are outside of it can imagine. We were in San Francisco together, covered the school board recall there. They were bounced out of office by an average of around 50 percentage points. It was staggering.
I think it was 70. And
it was like 75 to 25. So the margin was 50 percentage points. And you know, you saw it affect the race in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin, who was sort of a surprise winner there. It's definitely affecting population flows. I mean, people who never thought about moving to Florida, moving to Florida. The guy who was in this apartment just on Friday was, you know, as New York as it gets, and it's like, I'm thinking about like the only way to do right by my kids is to move to Florida right now. So like, I think that has its own impact, and there are going to be, it's it's going to be a small number, but there's going to be some people, especially those who like got involved in the process. I've interacted with quite a few of these people. Lifetime Democrat, might have even been a Bernie bro or whatever, but advocated for schools to be reopened. And as that in that process, got so disgusted by the way that they were treated, in addition to the way that Democrats ran policy, that they never want to even think about Democrats again, except in terms of bonfires. I mean, it's radicalizing to people. And I think some of the people in San Francisco, it was radicalizing to them. Not that their politics changed, but their tribal affiliations absolutely do.
And these people were, I mean, they were like borderline hippie socialists where they came from. And then they saw how they were treated and they were like, absolutely not. And you know what? Someone just told me 2 days ago that she's still a Californian, says she still keeps, oh, this was Olivia, Ted's daughter, said she still keeps seeing ads in San Francisco like, look how those Republicans ran the school board out of office.
Yeah, good luck with that. Dude.
It's like
there's 12 Republicans in San Francisco.
It was absolutely not the Republicans. It was very, very grassroots. And I think I'm actually going to head out there for the Chesa Boudin recall, which someone asked me a couple of nights ago, do you think he's going to be recalled? I was like, well, if the school board experience is any indication, on a rail. So we'll see. That's June 7th. We're bumping up against our time. But...
I want to get to, sorry.
Sure. No.
Will the inevitable pushback against COVID policies in school go too far, i.e. will the pendulum swing too far? Absolutely. It's already happening. In that.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Yeah. There was a piece yesterday, about the New York City health commissioner guy. There are people outside of his house in Brooklyn. Like he's got extra security detail. That's too far. People don't go to the person's house.
Don't do that.
Just don't. It's not a good idea. I know that's a big topic of discussion in other areas. Like, just don't go to the public official's house, even if they have done terrible things and you're mad. And so, yeah, it'll go that way. And you can see the Republicans are trying to take advantage of this by getting crazy about critical race theory and trying to, going against groomers. There's a lot of opportunistic people who are going to make it uncomfortable for those of us who are kind of trying to focus the task at hand and get it done, because that's just how our stupid political system works. So yes, the pendulum will swing in that direction. It'll go too far. It just always does. I always advocate for everybody to keep your eye on the prize, whatever it is, and fight for that. Don't get worried about being associated one way or the other. Just try to live a better life and do a better policy. Chief Jay Wally says, can you do a talk about Ukraine? Yes, that will happen, just not
Yes,
now.
We will do that.
Time.
Maybe with Michael Tracy. Guys, well, thank you for joining us on this first See You Next Tuesday. We actually won't see you next Tuesday unless we're doing it remote, because I'm going to be in Texas. Or Oklahoma, someplace, one of those places out there. And but we will be here the week after. So thanks for joining us. And
yes.
Go subscribe to the new Where the Fifth Column is over on Substack.
WeTheFifth.substack.com.
Because even if you were you'll know all that if you've already were a subscriber. You've got all their emails, and please.
But you get a lot of free stuff there too now.
Yeah, please go subscribe to Smoke 'em if you got 'em Substack, because we're doing some fun things for you.
And also go to PalomaMedia.com.
And PalomaMedia.com. But of course you know about Paloma Media because you're here. Of course, share it. Oh, we might have some cool stuff unrolling at Paloma next week.
That's true.
There we go.
A lot of news, people.
A lot of news. Okay, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the little heart, and thanks for the money.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
Never learn not to love money.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. It's always good to end with a Charles Manson quote.